Parker Elmore is here. He's the president of Odyssey Advisors. He's here to talk to us about OPEB, which I know is another acronym, but it's for other post-employee benefits that we need to be. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that this is out there and that at some point we might need to make a decision about it. So in the past prior years, Parker has actually done our Gatsby 45, which is required by law every 2 years, which is also the other post-employee benefits, our liability. So,
thank you for having us out. Hopefully everyone has a copy of we got a quick presentation that you guys can look at. We'll kind of walk you through that and try and get through it. You know, have questions, ask. We're happy to walk you through whatever makes sense. So basically the question is, what is this whole Governmental Accounting Standards Board 45 all about? Why are we doing this? Why does it matter? Why are we doing all this? Well, basically everyone has had these plans around for 40, 50, 60 years, going back to the 50s generally, which basically means your people retire, you provide them medical, dental, life insurance benefits after retirement, which is great. The issue is that until basically 2006 when Gatsby was released, and 2009 when you guys adopted it, nobody ever about to actually figure out what these things are actually worth. You just kind of paid the bill every year, and that was great. Well, the problem is, what's the actual, if you had to set money aside to cover these bills, what would it cost? Well, in your guys' case, it's about $50 million, what's been accrued to date, of which there's no cash actually backing it up. So in a perfect world, that would have happened over the last 40, 50 years. People would have set money aside. That didn't happen. So here's where we are. And you're not alone. Nobody set cash aside. We work with probably pushing 300 municipal entities in Massachusetts, between schools, towns, housing authorities, et cetera. We work with many more across the U.S. And of those, maybe 5% are materially have set money aside. So you're certainly not alone in that regard. Corporate America went through something similar in the early 90s. Most of the corporations got rid of such benefits because that's just the way we work in corporate America. That's not really as easy for you guys to do, nor necessarily as desirable for you guys to do, but that's just kind of how we handled it there. In terms of the benefits we're talking about, your retired teachers get medical, and dental, and life insurance via the Group Insurance Commission. They pay 100% for the dental, pay between 10 and 15% for the medical and the life insurance, depending on the date of retirement. For your non-teaching staff, they get it through your guys' plan. They pay 40% for the medical, and they'll pay 40% for the life insurance. So you have a $50 million liability. That's benefits that have been accrued to date. So it's a big chunk of money. You guys, every year for your retirees only, not your other medical costs, but retirees alone are paying about $2.1 million out the door. That's for retired teachers and the non-retired teachers. The non-teacher retirees, I should say that better. One of the key points here of what Gatsby 45 does is they want to have you recognize the costs while they're earned, not when you pay them. So we call it an annual OPEB cost. It's about $4.4 million a year. That's $2.3 million above your actual cash out the door cost. What that's saying is each year you're going to add $2.3 million onto your liability on your books, and over 30 years, eventually you'll get the whole $50 million recognized on your books. Now, the reality is, many of you have probably heard about something called Gatsby 67 and 68 on the pension side, where basically all these liabilities are going to move to your balance sheet. The same thing is happening on the retiree medical side by 2018. So although this, in theory, was going to take 30 years to get it all on your balance sheet, the reality is it's all going to be there by 2018. Kind of got an accelerated time frame. Your guys' costs have declined. You've had good experience. You're not alone. Basically, medical care costs over the last 3, 4, 5 years have been less than expected. We can argue a million different reasons for that, depending on where you fall on things. You can say it's drugs coming off patent. You can say it's recession. You could say it's healthcare reform. And a lot of people tell you they have no idea. My only concern with that is I wouldn't start spending those dollars yet and assume that we've crossed the threshold and from now on life is going to be great and medical care costs are going to be flat and they're never going to go up again. That would be nice, and let's all hope that happens, but we've also seen this story before in the early 90s, and then generally we had a couple of years of 15% inflation thereafter. So I guess I'd want to see a little more experience before we start banking on a world of flat medical care costs going forward. You guys currently have about 381 retirees and spouses currently taking coverage. We project that to get up to about 450 by 2026 and then start to come back down again. So you guys, still a fairly mature population. It's not going to change significantly. In today's dollars, your $2.1 million of costs, you'll stay basically in the same range for the next 40 to 50 years. So in terms of what percentage it's going to eat up of your budget, in today's dollars, it won't change. Yeah, you'll look at it and say, oh my God, it's going to be $9.5 million by 2052. But in today's dollars, it's still $2.1 million. So if you look at it, how it really impacts your budget, it's not really going to change a whole lot. In terms of the actual, then the question comes down to, okay, well, we got $50 million of liability. Should we start setting money aside to cover this? Now, future taxpayers would love you to do that because they say, well, why should we get stuck with the bill for people not putting money in for 40 or 50 years? And they'd be right. On the other hand, you say, well, we have bills to pay today. Again, that's true. So the question is, how do you get there? And I can tell you that we work with a lot of school districts trying to find ways to do this, a lot of towns trying to find ways to do this. It generally comes down to budget, capital needs. Are you looking to borrow money? Do you have free cash? Do you have ability without having to look for overrides? So it's a lot of things like that. I can tell you, Mattapoisett, we recently worked with, put in a 30-year funding schedule for them. They got a 2 ratings bump increase in their bond rating. We worked with Town of Middleborough. They're doing a slightly different approach on a 30-year funding schedule to get them funded. Northborough, Southborough, we're doing something different where they're going to basically work it into the contract negotiations to free up money to do it that way. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. I guess my key point is there's not one size fits all. There's a million different ways to fund this. And 90% of people aren't going to fund anything material. They might put in 1,000 here, 5,000 there, 10,000 there, but they're not going to put in significant dollars. For you guys to get the full funding over 30 years, you'd have to put in about $1.2 million a year for the next 30 years. Or you could say, we'll start about 900,000 and increase it to 2.5% a year. My guess is you probably don't have an extra $1 million a year laying around that you didn't know what to do with. If you do, I'm available. I'm just saying. But that said, I'm guessing you probably don't. But however, with that said, the other key element is, are you looking to borrow money? And I say it for that reason is, because if you're looking to borrow money, all of a sudden the bond rating becomes important. If you're not looking to borrow money, the bond rating is just a nice decorative item. But if you're looking to borrow money and you can say, hey, listen, if we're going to borrow 50, 60, 70 million dollars, well, all of a sudden we can get a 2 ratings or 1 or 2 ratings point increase. That might save us $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year on our bonding costs. So if that's the case, then funding may make more sense. If indeed you're not looking to borrow, then maybe you fund at a much lesser rate. And again, like I said, in the case of Middleborough, what we're doing is we're funding at a fairly modest level in the short run. I think we're starting at 200,000, and we're going to stay at that level for the next, I think, about 15 to 18 years until their pension funding is done. And then when that happens, we'll roll the pension funding in and take those dollars and apply them to this. We're doing a similar thing up in Hadley. In the case of Mattapoisett, they went with a flat 30-year funding schedule. So everyone does it differently, and that's my key point. Then the question is, okay, even if you decided to fund, so let's just say we found the $1 million we're going to put it in each year. Well, if we're going to do that, should we set up into an OPEB trust, of which you can use people like Pritt or Bartholomew? I'm sure all those folks have probably talked to you by now. Or do you put it in a stabilization type reserve? They each have their pluses and minuses. If you put it in the OPEB trust, it can only be spent for these types of benefits. Now, that said, you're spending $2.1 million a year. So if 3 years from now, after putting in $1 million a year, you said, you know, those group in 2014, I don't know what they were thinking. This was a stupid idea. We don't want to have this OPEB trust anymore. Well, in reality, you could eat it up in a year and a half by paying out $2 million a year to pay these benefits. So you could unwind it pretty easily if that was indeed your goal. I'm not saying that should be your goal. I'm just simply saying it's a pretty easy way to get out if that was your, you change your mind down the road. Now, the stabilization reserve gives you the most flexibility of all. You could decide, hey, we put it in, we're going to label it OPEB, and then, a year later we label it swimming pool, and a year later we label it, new soccer field, whatever. You can do whatever you want to do. So that gives you a lot more flexibility. Theoretically, the stabilization reserve should not count as an asset for OPEB purposes. I say that theoretically because the statement is pretty clear that it should only be things that are in a GASB trust. However, I will tell you probably half of the auditors allow you to count a stabilization reserve. So the statement says one thing, the auditors say another. The auditors sign financial statements, so that's what we go by. So again, there's different ways to go about this. There's not one size fits all. We thought it'd be helpful to just kind of show you just an example of some other school districts and people here in Plymouth County, kind of what's going on. Just kind of how you stack up, basically. One of the key elements we always talk about is normal cost, which is in your guys' case about $1.6 million a year. And what that means is, what are the benefits being accrued by your active employees each and every year? Each and every year, your active employees are accruing another $1.6 million of liability. Or in your case, about $3,600 per active employee.